inflation numbers for the month of August were out, Suyash. Inflation at about 6.83% in the month of August from 7.44% in the month of July has eased a little bit, allaying a lot of worries and fears on streets on whether inflation will be tamed, will be within the target projection for this quarter. Still looks very unlikely because the month of September could play a big dampener, so to say.
Definitely a positive surprise for the street and the market, Shweta, because the expectation was that retail inflation will come about at 7% or 7.1%. It has come down about 27 basis points lower than that at about 6.83% or so. Now, one of the key factors because of which inflation has cooled in the month gone by was that vegetable prices have come down. On a month-on-month basis, they have come down by about 6%. Although we are seeing divergent performance, tomato prices have come down by about 2.5%, whereas potato prices and onion prices have gone up. Also, another worry that maybe the markets will track is the inflation in pulses and cereals, which has been a pain point in the previous months as well. Now, as you also mentioned, RBI has a guidance for the quarter, for the July to September quarter of about 6.2%. So, unless they come in significantly below in the September quarter, the number comes significantly below the 5% mark. There is no way that we will be, or highly improbable that we will, we will be able to achieve that RBI's target, short-term target for this quarter of about 6.2%. Now, another thing is that LPG prices had been cut in last month. So, we'll see some effect of it, which will definitely bring down the headline inflation. But the core inflation, Shweta, core inflation moderated slightly. So RBI, which keeps an eye on core inflation, unless there is a significant pickup in that regard, maybe we won't see a rate hike. So, would you share that?
It's a good question to ask, Vijay. Vijay, what are you expecting? I mean, come to think of it, the number has been a little bit of a surprise, positive surprise there at 6.83%. The estimates was that it's going to be around 7%. In fact, all economists had been saying so. At 6.83%, it's very close to the 4% plus minus target of RBI, albeit if the overall inflation for the second quarter has to come in at about 6.2%, September will be a very, very crucial month.
I completely agree with you, Shweta. Inflation is a metric that most investors / traders tend to understate, underfactor, and possibly even overlook. Now, inflation, why is it important? Inflation directly impacts interest rate sensitive stocks like banks, NBFCs, companies that depend on EMI based sales of their products. So, if inflation is higher, the average household savings contract and they are able to spend less on either personal consumption expenditure or non-discretionary discretionary expenses. So any fall in inflation is always welcome. As a matter of fact, lower inflation will also strengthen the rupee as one of the factors that will determine the currency peg versus the dollar. So lower inflation is a welcome sign, which is why you saw the forex markets give you a green flag yesterday. So the rupee strengthened against the dollar yesterday. And should inflation come to within the RBI's comfort zone, I think fears of rate hikes or maybe even elevated coupon rates on the RBI's Monetary Policy Committee monthly bi-monthly meetings would basically ease. There would be no more fears that RBI would continue to hike interest rates or maybe even keep them elevated. Any decline in coupon rates in India would immediately prove to be a buoyant factor for both our money markets and equity markets as a whole.
All right. And before I move to CPI numbers from the US, expected to be out tonight or today as per US timing, I am more concerned about vegetable inflation in India. It's still at about 26.1% as against 37.34% in the month of July. Now, this is a human problem, sir. This is not just a problem with investors, traders. This is a problem with that an average common person out there on the streets is facing and is faced with on a daily basis. There should not have to be a choice between feeding yourselves and living a healthy life versus saving money. I think one should be able to do both. I know government is taking administrative measures, Suyash. We've been covering some of those administrative measures here on News 9, but September is all the more crucial because whether it will rain enough or not, whether monsoon pattern will be in line with expectation, will perhaps overshadow the expectations, all of that will determine how vegetable prices will move and in a sense determine how much people will be able to save, as a matter of fact, in the month of September. So crucial month to watch out for.
Talking about vegetable inflation, Shweta, now it's something that pinches the middle class really hard because you can see the impact of it directly in your budget. As a matter of fact, I was just reading this report where, CRISIL's report, which said that a cost of vegetable thali on a year-on-year basis has jumped up about 24%. Your standard thali, which costs about 80 to 90 rupees, has jumped up by 24% in a year's time. So definitely something that we need to keep a track of, cautious about the vegetable prices, although they have come down about 6% on a month-on-month basis. So, if we can get your expectations, how do you see vegetable inflation playing out in the next month's time? Can we expect it to ease further? What are your expectations, sir?
And also, while at it, I think it's in the SBI EcoWrap report pointed towards inflation reaching within the RBI's comfort zone. Could the headline inflation, in fact, in the month of September, could come in at 5.5%? That is what the EcoWrap report says at this point. Do you agree with those projections?
Well, it's very difficult to forecast food price inflation because there are so many imponderables and variables like the weather. We are now talking about monsoon, whether it will play catch up with the deficiency that it gave us in the month of August. So these are not factors that are in human control. What you call hand of God comes into effect here. Two things will need to be kept in mind. Number one, the base effect. So the inflation rate or the trajectory has been higher. So the base effect will come in, will kick in. And therefore, going forward, if even prices are contained or even marginally reduced, like for example, Suyash pointed out about the prices of tomatoes. So if prices come down marginally on a base effect basis, on a relative comparative basis, there will be a kicker effect, multiplier effect. So inflation will appear to have come down somewhat. So will it come to the SBI's EcoWrap report levels of sub 6%? Difficult to say. I'm not an expert agriculturalist or
Right.
an economist who focuses purely on inflation. I do hope it comes to that level.
All right. I think we're all hoping that inflation will moderate in the month of September. All eyes will be on inflation numbers going ahead. But also tonight, a very important event by the way of, CPI inflation numbers for the US. We will, of course, keep tracking those events here on News 9. Vijay, thanks very much, sir, for taking time out, for joining us this morning. Good to have you on the show.
Always my pleasure.